Alrighty, thank you for tuning in today. Welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we check into great theories, concepts, and discoveries that you might not know about because they've been suppressed. The powers that be don't want you to know about this stuff, and so we take it upon ourselves to make sure that it stays in the discussion. And this is another Bible decode. I think this is number 416. And we've examined all aspects of the Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament over the last, 200 or so videos. And actually, more like 400 videos. And that is that the Romans are the true authors of the New Testament. They wrote the New Testament as a psychological operation against the Jews, really as an attempt to destroy Judaism, or really to prune it, to graft themselves onto the end of the Roman, of the Jewish lineage. And they did it by writing a history of the war between the Romans and the Jews that occurred from 66 to 73 AD. That came out under the name of Josephus. I don't really have anything definitive to say about the existence of Josephus, but we know that he was an agent of the Romans, or he was emanating from Caesar's palace in Rome. Whether he was a composite figure, a real person, or a whole think tank of intellectuals, I don't know. But he is also, whoever Josephus was also the author of the Gospels, which you can tell if you read them side by side, particularly the book of Luke, and particularly if you read the military campaign of General Titus side by side with the ministry of Jesus, because they are identical. But this is just one of many similarities, coincidences, correspondences between Josephus's War of the Jews and the Gospels. There are many, many different themes involved. The Romans wrote the New Testament as a way to try to mellow out or mollify or tame or domesticate the Jews, who had been a big pain for the Romans to govern ever since they arrived in Judea in 63 BC, over a century before this. And so the Romans reached into their bag of tricks, psychological warfare. They were masters of it. And they were also masters of creating religions out of nothing. They created a handful of other religions here at this very time, including rabbinical Judaism for a kind of a different group of Jews, the Pharisees. Christianity was really created for the more zealous Jews, the Messianic Jews, the ones that were waiting for a Messiah. And so instead, the Romans went against the Jewish prophecies, which were forecasting a military Messiah, a Messiah who was going to deliver the Jews from the occupying power, in this case the Romans. So instead, the Romans wrote a story of a Jewish Messiah who was a Prince of Peace and who believed in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and walking the extra mile with the Roman soldiers' heavy backpack on their back and turning the other cheek to oppression. And at the same time, um, this Jesus character, fictional character, was very critical of the Jewish traditions and rituals, uh, overturning the tables of the Jewish money changers at the temple, and castigating the Jewish merchants selling small animals at the temple, and um, in general, cussing out the uh, the Jews uh, at every turn. And throughout the Gospels, never once does Jesus do anything against the Romans, although he does refer to them as something, uh, dogs or something at one point. Um, but he is continually um, going after the Jews. And then Paul is even worse. He's even more deferential to the Romans and even more condescending of the Jews. This in spite of the fact that both of them are supposed to be Jews. So this is highly irregular and should raise red flags, but it doesn't for some reason. And that, as a truther, you need to ask yourself why you're not even vaguely curious why um, these people are acting so out of character. Now, when the Romans wrote the New Testament, they employed, um, what you would call a limited hangout. They had to make it look good. They had to make it look like a religion. And so they employed a number of other influences, other texts, other stories that they borrowed and inserted into their gospels. Different influences from all over the world. And that's why I think it was kind of like a think tank of intellectuals that the Romans used to write the gospels, because they used ancient Egyptian uh, mythology and religion, Persian mythology and religion, mystery schools, pagan mystery schools, and numerology, astrology, shamanism, magic traditions, ancient Indian and ancient Chinese traditions, rituals, religion and mythology, among other things. And these are all documented here in this book called 16 Crucified Saviors Before Christianity by Kersey Graves. And this book is old, from 1876. And we are in chapter 34 of this book, where we are going over some of the miracles as well as prophecies um, that are similar to miracles that are reported in the Gospels. And this section here is called Satanic Miracles. Among all the workers of miracles reported in the Bible, the devil seems to have been preeminent, and hence must come in for the better end of the argument toward proving him to have been a god. No miracle could excel the act of his transforming himself into an angel of light as stated in 2 Corinthians 11:14. It is not transcended by any other case, not even by Christ's transfiguration. And according to Paul, he was endowed with all power and signs and lying wonders. It's in Thessalonians 2:9. If then he possessed all power, Christ and no other God could have possessed a miraculous power superior to his, for all comprehends the whole, beyond which nothing can reach. Where then is the evidence to come from to prove that Christ was a God, because he was a miracle worker, or his religion divine because attested by miracles? Seeing the devil performed some of the most difficult miracles ever wrought, should we not then change his title from that of a demon to a god and place his religion among the divinely endowed systems? St. John represents the evil one as having power to make fire come down from heaven in the sight of men, and to deceive those that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he hath power to do. And that's Revelation 13:13. Um, yeah, well, interesting here. Kersey Graves, we will be looking at another one of his books that came out a little earlier, 1865, that is called The Birth of Satan. And here he does point in the right direction. Now, Graves is not he is not privy to the Roman origins hypothesis. He doesn't understand that the Romans are the true authors. He just recognized that it is that whoever put together the Gospels, that they used all of these diverse sources from that were much older than uh, the, than the New Testament, that went back thousands of years earlier. He doesn't really know who it was that was compiling all of these things, but it's the Romans, and the Romans are the ones who created Jesus, but the Romans also at the same time created Satan. There is no Satan in the Old Testament of the Bible. There is the Satan. There is the Satan, the word Satan basically meaning adversary or obstacle or impediment. And anytime that the Old Testament uses the term Satan, which is only a handful of times, it's always referring to a human being. And in fact, in one case, it's referring to David. And so they always use the article the before Satan, the obstacle, the impediment. But it's not until the New Testament that Satan with a capital S comes along, where it's Satan who is got supernatural powers. Satan in the Old Testament is more of a character who is an agent of God, a messenger of God, or a emissary of God, to do a job for God. But in the New Testament, the Romans create a different kind of Satan, who is really a competitor to God, an evil force that is really just as big as God is, just as powerful as God is. And I commented on this in a different video today, that I do see a lot of people, patriots especially, making this mistake Christian truthers that they, I believe in God, therefore I also believe in Satan. And those two things don't go together necessarily. They do if you kind of believe in this Roman version here, but I would posit that Satan and evil are local. They are local phenomena, whereas God is a universal phenomenon. Um, Evil, and Dewey Larson in his book Beyond Space and Time, where he applies the reciprocal system of theory to metaphysical matters, he notes that theoretically, each planet or each world has their own form of evil. Um, Evil is a local phenomenon, whereas God is a universal phenomenon. So, um, and I feel like Christians, I do these Bible decodes, and Christians generally don't like it, because it attacks their belief systems. But I find that they're just as offended when I tell them that Jesus is a fictional character. They seem to be almost more offended when I tell them that Satan is a fictional character. It's like they cling on to Satan just really as harder than they cling on to Jesus. They have to be able to have this explanation for evil, this convenient thing that they can just throw the name Satan down to express their concept of evil. And generally, what I would say is that evil is really our responsibility. And, this is not to say that there are not, forces out there. There are ghosts and other disembodied beings that can take the place of an evil entity. But it's not this supernatural, all powerful thing. And that's kind of what Graves is referring to here. He says, the evidence to come from to prove that Christ was a God because he was a miracle worker, or his religion divine because attested by miracles. Seeing the devil perform some of the most difficult miracles ever wrought, should we not change his title from that of a demon to a god and place his religion among the divinely endowed systems? It seems like Christians kind of want to do that they want to place Satan in the pantheon of gods. And I would posit that is a Roman invention that has been exacerbated throughout the Western tradition, in various forms of artwork, as well as in Dante's Divine Comedy and Milton's Paradise Lost and others, but especially by Hollywood. I think that, if you think of your image of Satan, you probably come up with like a cartoon character. Um, and you can thank Hollywood for that. Okay, let's continue with Graves here. Here the question arises, what can a miracle prove? What end can it serve? Or what good can possibly arise from the display of the miracle working power when it is liable, quote, to deceive those that dwell upon the earth? Certainly, therefore, it proves nothing and it accomplishes nothing. And may not the apostles themselves have been deceived in ascribing some of the miracles they record to Jesus instead of the devil. Certainly, we are drifted upon the quicksands of uncertainty by such a display of the miracle working power and are obnoxious to most fatal deception, which proves the total inutility and futility of such prodigies. Okay, that was a little bit confusing, um, but I think the main point is that, uh, you know, uh, Satan is being given um, supernatural powers, including miracle working powers, by the Romans who created him in the New Testament, alongside creating Jesus. Okay, this section is called Christ's Miracles, Not His Own, but wrought through him and not by him. Wrought through him and not by him. How could Christ's miracles, assuming they were wrought, do anything toward proving his divinity when he did not claim to be their author, but merely the agent or instrument in the hands of the Father, like the apostles who are reported to have performed the same miracles? Now, recall that both Peter and Paul perform miracles in Acts, and I think even in some of the Gospels. The Father, he doeth the work, is his own declaration, and the apostles seem to have accepted his word and his view of the matter. For proof, listen to Peter. Quote, "Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourselves do know." And that's Acts 2:22. Let it be noted, then, that Christ's miracles were not performed by him as a God, but as a man, approved of God. He was the mere medium or instrument in the case, a fact which banishes at once all grounds for controversy relative to his miracles, serving the purpose of attesting his divinity, especially when it is conceded that men, magicians, and devils could achieve the same feats. And then this section is called Christ's Miracles Did Not Convince the People. As the miracles of Christ seem to have had little effect toward convincing the people of his claims to the Godhead, it is evident that they could have been but little superior to those performed by others, and therefore not designed, at least not calculated, to convince them that he was a God. The frequent instances in which he upbraids the people for their unbelief and calls them fools, slow of heart, etc., is a proof of this statement. A circumstance involving pretty strong proof that Christ's miraculous achievements were not considered as evidence of his divinity is the fact that they were frequently performed in private, sometimes in the night, and often under the injunction of secrecy. "See thou tell no man," was the injunction after the feat was performed, perhaps in a private room. How can such facts be reconciled with the assumption that his miracles were designed to convince the people of his claim to the divine entity, as Christians frequently assert, when the people were not allowed to witness them, nor his disciples even to report them? Who can believe that he was a divine being or Messiah when when he charged his disciples to tell no man that he was such a being? Such incongruities verge to a contradiction. It is a logical contradiction to say that private miracles were designed to dissolve public skepticism. And yet, many, if not most, of his reputed miraculous achievements were of this character. When he cured a blind man, he not only led him out of the town in Mark 8:23, but forbid him, when his sight was restored, returning to the city for fear he would publish it. When he resurrected Lazarus, which, if you read it carefully, he does not resurrect Lazarus. He brings Lazarus' dead body out of the ground and takes him home and makes him a supper. This is part of the Roman satire to cannibalism. As I was saying, the Romans are mocking and ridiculing you with the Gospels. And that is part of it when they bring Lazarus's dead body home and make him a supper. And at that point, Mary is anointing Jesus, and Martha comes into the kitchen or out of the kitchen and chides Jesus to tell Mary to help her in the kitchen. And Jesus says, Mary has chosen the good portion. Now, if you go to Josephus, War of the Jews, there is a scene, a gratuitous scene, that there's no way that Josephus would have ever been able to know about this scene because there are no eyewitness, it's an omniscient type of scene, where there is a woman named Mary who is trapped within the walls of Jerusalem during the siege of the Romans, and there is starvation happening within the walls of Jerusalem. And Mary is crazed by starvation, and so Mary decides to roast her infant child. And she roasts and eats half of her infant child, but saves the rest. And at a certain point, the Roman soldiers break into her confines, and she offers the other half of the roasted infant son to the Romans, who are horrified. But she says, I have saved the good portion for you. The identical language that Jesus uses in the parallel themed passage in the New Testament. So this is just another one of the, mocking satires that the Romans are using, basically mocking the Jews for being cannibals within the walls of Jerusalem. And incidentally, this is exactly the same theme that William Shakespeare reverses in his many of his plays, especially in The Merchant of Venice, that he turns around the cannibal. Well, it's really a her. Shakespeare was a Jewish woman, but she turns around the cannibal theme to put it onto the Gentiles instead of the Jews, So the entire oeuvre of Shakespeare, all of Shakespeare's plays, is are a counterattack to the Roman um, attack on the Jews in the name of Christianity or in the name of the Gospels or the whole gospel system, because it also includes Josephus. So, right there, we're just taking a wrecking ball to Western civilization, knocking out the most popular book ever written, the Bible, the second most popular book ever written, the War of the Jews by Josephus, and the most popular uh, English writer ever, William Shakespeare. All three of them are completely not to be taken seriously because they're all involved in psychological operations here. Um, and so this is rather devastating. Okay, now when we get back to Lazarus, Kersey Graves makes the mistake of thinking that Jesus resurrected Lazarus. But let's just assume that he's right here. When he resurrected Lazarus, he did not call the whole country around to witness it, but performed the act before a private party. The reanimation of Jairus' daughter was in the same concealed manner, in a private room where nobody was admitted but his three confidential disciples, Peter, James, and John, and the parents, none of whom make any report of the case. How, therefore, the reporter Mark found it out when he was not present, and none of the party were allowed to tell it to anybody, or why he should betray his trust by publishing it if he was informed of it, is a mystery of godliness, or what you would maybe call omniscience, even though Mark is supposed to have been a informant of Peter. So, not easily divined. When Christ cleansed the leper, he sent him to the priest, enjoining him to say nothing to any man. The dumb, when restored to speech, was not allowed to exhibit any practical proof of the fact by using his tongue. His miraculous perambulation on the surface of the sea, walking on the water, was not only alone, but in the dark. His transfiguration, likewise, according to Dr. Barnes, took place in the night. His three favorite companions being the only witnesses, and they heavy with sleep. Now, again, with the transfiguration, the only witnesses of this were I believe, again, Peter, James, and John. Peter is the informant of Mark, um, and then James and John were there. Um, I, I thought it was not John, but whichever way it went, the only evangelist, the only gospel that mentions the transfiguration is the one of the disciples who was not there. The ones who were there did not report it. So that is also an interesting aside. Um, so his companions being favorite companions being the only witnesses, and they heavy with sleep. And finally, the crowning miracle of all, the resurrection, is not only represented as taking place in the night, but without one substantial or terrestrial witness to report it. Verily, such facts as these are not calculated to augment the faith or work the conviction of a skeptic that these miracles were ever performed, seeing so few are reported as witnessing them, and even their testimony is not given. We have not the testimony of one person who claims to have been present and seen these wonders performed. Such facts are calculated to cast distrust upon the whole matter, especially when taken in connection with the fact that 9/10 of his life form a perfect blank in history. Is it possible, we ask, to reconcile such a fact with the belief of his divinity? Is it possible a God could lead a private life or live 27 years on earth and do nothing worthy of note? A God known to nobody and noticed by nobody. Most transcendingly absurd is such a thought. Had Christ possessed the character that is claimed for him, not an hour of his life could have passed unaccompanied by some remarkable incident that would have been heralded abroad, and its record indelibly engraven upon the page of history. But instead of this, his acts were too commonplace to be noticed. And that is, I would agree, a big red flag that nobody noticed anything that he was doing for his whole life. Um, okay, we're gonna hold it right there, and we'll get back into um, Kersey Graves tomorrow. The next section is called All History Ignores Him. So I guess that'll be about the same theme. And for today, thanks for tuning in. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and contribute. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a great day.